What's up, everyone? A family member of mine opened her closet one morning, and all of her clothes were on the floor. The builder who's responsible used melamine and cheap poles that eventually ended up breaking. After listening to the customer's needs, this is what we came up with. On the left side, she wanted room for her longer garments. She wanted shelves up the middle for shoes and pocketbooks, and 2 poles on the right side. So this is the design I came up with in SketchUp. Let's start breaking down this plywood and prepping our components. I marked both sides and the middle of my plywood. It looks like someone had a skid mark competition on my sheet of plywood, and I'm not talking car tires. I use these 6-inch C-clamps because the motor on my saw ends up hitting all my other clamps. The straight edge flexes a bit in the middle, so I clamp a scrap piece of wood in the middle to keep it from deflecting. Then I sight down the edge and make sure it's straight. I like to set my plywood on a 1-inch piece of foam. I've been kicking the same piece around for almost a year now, and it's been worth every penny. I call this my track saw jig. For the smaller cuts, it's more accurate, it's much easier to set up. When switching from the metal straight edge to this jig, I have to increase the depth of my cut by 1/4 inch. It would be best to make all these rips on a table saw, but my table saw doesn't open this far. All of my components on the right side are cut to 48 inches, the shelves, the trims, and the poles. I have fewer components on the left side, just a small shelf, piece of trim, and a pole. I'll cut these a few inches long, paint them, and cut them to final size on site. This piece for the middle shelf is cut to 21.5, so when the trim goes on, it'll be 22.25. Make sure you leave at least 1 inch of space from your trim to the wall. If your closet's 24 inches deep, don't go bigger than a 23-inch finish. The top shelf is much shallower at 11.5, otherwise you wouldn't be able to reach in there. This is a pretty simple jig I use for cutting dado slots. I use a 3/4 inch straight bit. It's a true 3/4 inches. The plywood's not a true 3/4, it's about a 32nd of an inch smaller. Once those shelves get painted, they'll fit in this true 3/4 inch dado very nicely. It's a good habit to turn your router off and then pick it up. I made a mark at the top of my shelves and worked my way down cutting those dados. The first shelf is 15 inches and the rest of the shelves are 10 inches, so 15, 25, 35, etc. I then flip my panel over to make a dado for the right shelf and a small dado at the top for the top right shelf. This shelf doesn't go all the way through, so I clean it up with a knife and a chisel. Sanded both sides of every piece with a bit of 220 grit. Then started prepping my poles and my trims. The 2 poles on the right will be exactly 48 inches. And I cut that pole on the left, I think to like 2'6" or something. I cut all my trims about 1 inch long, and once they're painted, I'll cut them down to final size. Here's my painting set up in my basement. This isn't even all the pieces. I I use a 6-inch high-density foam roller for all this. 2 or 3 coats will do it, except for the spots where I had those brown skid marks on my panels. Those took a few extra. This long piece here is my shelves up that bookcase. It was easier to paint it and then cut them to size afterwards. For my second cut, I measure up 16 1/4, and then I measure back off that factory edge and use that number to mark the second side. This keeps me from falling out of square as I make consecutive cuts up the same piece. I double check right here to see if I have 16 1/4, and it was about a 32nd of an inch off, which isn't a big deal, but after 3 or 4 cuts it could really add up and really throw you off. I ripped down a scrap piece of 1x2 to 3/4 inches to make cleats where my shelves contact the drywall. That saw is not supposed to sound like that. I figured I'd put a 1/4 inch round over on the bottom edge of those cleats just to kind of spruce them up a little bit. You don't need a router table to do this. You can clamp your workpiece down and then just hit it with a trim router. For me, it's easier to use this router table because I have it. Then I made a 45-degree cut on either end for a bit of detail. These cleats are a few inches shorter than the shelf itself. To paint these poles, I hung them from the ceiling. And here's my setup for the second round of painting. I put blue tape on either side of the dados to help with glue squeeze out. Getting glue out of those inside corners can get pretty rough. Those parallel wood clamps are great for holding panels upright. Put a little glue on my dado, hit it with a finger, then plug the first shelf in. Sorry I'm so sweaty, it is very hot in here. I put 5 or 6 18-gauge nails up either end to hold it in place. Right now the face of this bookcase is facing down towards my table. It's important to flush all your shelves to the face so that it looks nice when you get the trim on. If my shelves are a little long or a little short, it'll be on the back of the bookcase and you won't see it. You also want to check for square as you go. You don't want the glue to start setting if you're not square. This is a family member rolling up. His name is Dan. He's going to help me with some plumbing issues in the basement. 94 it says. It's crazy. Right now I'm working on a closet. Holy, I'm dying.
Yep.
Let me just finish this one. I flush up this front edge a bit with the sander. Mark the length of my trim. Preset the depth of my clamps. A little bit of wood glue. Sometimes when using a nail gun, those nails will blow out the side. If you're holding the nail gun upright, the nails will always bend left or right. So holding my nail gun like this, if the nails were to bend, they would still be in my workpiece. I measure each shelf trim individually because there's a small amount of variability. And nailed those on. I glob some wood putty in those nail holes and then sand it down with a bit of 220 grit. I then touched up any of those spots, any scuffs, and tomorrow morning we install. Alright, it's tomorrow morning. We're in the customer's house and we're installing a support brace just below eye level. This is where we will fasten the whole unit to the wall. I apologize, I have no sound here, but the customer had her TV on and I couldn't let it play or I'll probably trigger a copyright issue or something. I ended up taking these doors off and they weighed almost as much as I did. I'm using my 48-inch shelf on the right to determine where my bookcase will live. Then I can mark the baseboard and cut it with my oscillating multi-tool. I'm using my laser level as a benchmark and measuring to determine how far off of plumb I am. I'll stick a few shims underneath, get this thing plumb, then I'll screw it to the wall studs through that brace I installed earlier. There's a couple of holes in this closet from the old assembly. If I had known there were so many holes, I would have brought a bit of spackle to touch them up, but it's alright. 2 screws into the wall stud will hold this thing really nicely. I'm using my laser to mark the bottom of the shelf so I can get my cleats installed on that right wall. You can use a regular level for this, it'll work just fine. The bottom of my shelf is also the top of my cleat. I got a 25 pack of screws and drywall anchors. I use the screws here to mark the drywall where my anchors need to go. Then I drill them out, pop my anchors in, and hammer them in with my hammer. I install the cleat. And then I get my shelf in place. Doing the top shelf first. If I did the bottom shelf first, it would be really difficult to access this top shelf. So the order of operations is important here. I got my bottom cleat on. Time to trim out the top. I put nails roughly every, 8 inches or so. There was nowhere else to put the camera, and I'm sorry. But I put some nails on the right side and the left side. Please don't look at my best side for too long. I left 2 3/4 inches from the bottom of the shelf, not the trim, from the bottom of the shelf to the top of the pole. I also center the poles in this space. Here I'm marking where my drywall anchors will go. Drill in the holes. push it in my anchors. And putting in those screws. It's extremely important to make sure there's no plumbing in the wall before you go poking holes in the drywall. If you hit a pipe, it will be disastrous. I install my poles. I install my middle shelf. I nail the right side of this middle shelf. Nail in my trim. I wasn't able to show you guys how I installed that top left side, but it's just the same. I measured how big the pieces needed to be, cut them outside, and installed them. Now I'm doing a little bit of touch up with this little foam brush. And this is our final product. Here's the right side. And here's the left side. The customer was ecstatic. She really loved it. She's super stoked. There's no better feeling than when a plan comes together and a happy customer. If you found this video helpful or entertaining, please throw me a like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more videos like this.